Have you ever wondered why some men become uneasy around a woman who radiates peace, not passivity, but a deep, unshakable calm that feels like it cannot be disturbed? There's something haunting about a woman who is no longer moved by chaos. Her silence does not seek validation. Her stillness does not beg to be understood. She carries an atmosphere of quiet order, as if her soul has already seen every storm and chosen not to flinch again. To men still ruled by ego, that serenity feels like danger, because peace, true peace, exposes what noise has been hiding. You see, most men have been taught to feel powerful through reaction. When a woman argues, pleads, or defends, they know where they stand. They mistake emotional turbulence for passion, tension for connection, and control for leadership. But when she stops engaging in those old games, when she listens without absorbing, when she meets provocation with composure, something inside him begins to tremble. Her calm becomes a mirror, reflecting his restlessness, his need for dominance, his fear of irrelevance. In the language of Jung, this is the shadow rising, the confrontation between his conscious self-image and the insecurities he's long denied. The peaceful woman disarms not through defiance, but through stillness. She does not fight. She reveals. Her energy is not aggressive, yet it penetrates everything. She doesn't mirror his ego anymore. She mirrors his essence, and that reflection can be unbearable for a man who has built his worth on control. To him, her calm feels like distance. Her independence feels like rejection, and her silence feels like judgment. But it is none of those things. It is simply the end of illusion. Jung once said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And that is why peaceful women unsettle the unhealed masculine. Her peace triggers his unrest. Her groundedness magnifies his instability. Her contentment reveals his dependency. She does not wound him with words. She awakens him with absence. No longer performing emotional labor to stabilize his self-image, she forces him to face what his power cannot touch. The fact that peace cannot be controlled, only matched. To the unconscious man, this peace feels like annihilation. Without her emotional reaction to anchor his ego, he feels invisible. He mistakes her equanimity for indifference, because he cannot yet tell the difference between being ignored and being free. Her lack of reaction becomes unbearable, because it dismantles the feedback loop that once defined his sense of dominance. He realizes too late that her peace is not submission, it is sovereignty. She no longer needs to fight because she no longer needs to prove. This is the hidden fear few men can name, that a woman's calm means she no longer needs them to define her reality. She has withdrawn her energy from conflict, reclaimed her emotional center, and discovered that silence can be sharper than resistance. She is not playing the game anymore. And for the man who only knows how to love through struggle, that absence feels like defeat. The peaceful woman stands as a living paradox, soft yet unyielding, gentle yet formidable. She is the embodiment of what Jung called the integrated feminine, emotion and reason balanced, intuition and clarity intertwined. Her calm is not emptiness, it is mastery. It's not that she feels less, it's that she feels deeply and chooses not to let it rule her. To meet her presence is to feel something ancient stir within the psyche, the confrontation with true equilibrium. And while some men will rise to meet her vibration, others will recoil, unable to exist beside what they cannot command. Because peace, in its purest form, is not the absence of power. It is the presence of it. The man who meets a peaceful woman encounters a mirror he didn't know he feared. At first, he's drawn to her calm, mistaking it for softness, assuming that her gentleness means she can be molded, persuaded, or conquered. But soon, that illusion cracks. Her serenity is not pliability. It is the quiet discipline of someone who no longer participates in unconscious drama. She listens with still eyes, and in that gaze, he senses something disarming. She is not reacting. She is perceiving. Every word he speaks reveals more about him than about her. This is where fear begins. Because in a world where attention is power, her neutrality feels like deprivation. The man who once thrived on emotional chaos begins to feel small in the face of her restraint. His usual methods charm, withdrawal, dominance. Guilt no longer move her. Her peace is not apathy, it's immunity. She has outgrown the vibration of manipulation. And to the ego-driven masculine, that is the most terrifying loss of all, not the loss of love, but the loss of control over how he is seen. She doesn't seek to fix, to argue, or to please. Instead, she watches. Jung might say she has withdrawn her anima, that archetypal projection that gives men their sense of wholeness through women's emotional validation. Without it, he is left to face himself. Her calm is the psychological equivalent of light in a dark room. It shows what has always been there, but was never acknowledged. For the man unprepared to meet his own shadow, that exposure feels unbearable. He starts to test her peace, not consciously, but instinctively. He pushes boundaries, seeking proof that she still feels, that she still cares enough to react. He mistakes reaction for relevance, forgetting that love doesn't require chaos to be real. But the peaceful woman doesn't play that game anymore. She understands what Seneca meant when he said, "He who is brave is free." Her freedom lies in her refusal to be dragged into emotional turbulence. Her silence is not withdrawal, it's ascension. For the conscious man, her composure is magnetic. It calls forth his highest nature, urging him to rise into his own maturity. He begins to understand that leadership without ego, love without control, and presence without possession are the only currencies that hold value in her world. To be near her peace requires self-mastery, but for the unawakened, her serenity feels like suffocation, because peace forces accountability. It asks the question, who are you when there's nothing left to fight? This is the paradox that defines her allure. She does nothing, yet everything around her begins to change. She doesn't manipulate, yet her presence reorganizes the emotional order of a room. She speaks little, yet her energy commands attention. The calm woman's power lies in what she does not give away. Her restraint becomes a mirror for excess. Her silence a challenge to insecurity. She embodies the Stoic principle that mastery begins when reaction ends. Men who live on emotional survival instinct feel disarmed by her stillness. It denies them their usual fuel, the drama, the push and pull, the reassurance that they matter through conflict. Without it, they feel invisible. But she knows that visibility without respect is exploitation. So she no longer over-explains, overfeels, or overgives. Her peace is her filter. It determines who can meet her depth and who will drown in their own noise. And this is why she both fascinates and frightens. She is no longer accessible to the wounded masculine. Her energy vibrates at a frequency that repels pretense. To approach her requires authenticity. And that's the one thing many men have been taught to hide. Over time, her peace begins to transform the entire dynamic between them. What once felt like stability to him now feels like exposure. In her silence, he begins to hear himself too clearly. The tone of his voice, the weight of his ego, the small manipulations he once used to control connection. Without her emotional feedback, his patterns lose meaning. He starts to realize that much of what he called love was actually dependency. The need to feel important through another's chaos. Her composure removes that mirror, leaving him alone with his own reflection. He tries to provoke her into reacting, just to restore the old rhythm, the fire, the tension, the push and pull that made him feel alive. But the peaceful woman does not rise to that bait. She has learned the difference between intimacy and intensity. Intensity excites the ego. Intimacy nourishes the soul. What he interprets as distance is actually discernment. She no longer confuses connection with captivity. She no longer bleeds to prove her depth. Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Her peace is the embodiment of that consciousness. She is no longer governed by compulsion, no longer chasing the same emotional highs that once drained her. Her serenity isn't passive, it's surgical. It cuts through illusion with the precision of self-awareness. She knows that peace is not the absence of feeling, but the presence of clarity to a man still bound by ego. That clarity feels threatening. It's not her rejection that scares him. It's her reflection. Because when she no longer reacts to his shadow, he must finally face it himself. Her calm strips away every mask he's used to perform worthiness. She no longer validates the performance. She watches the truth beneath it. And when his words no longer work, when his charm no longer disarms, he begins to realize that she never needed him to lead. She needed him to evolve. But few men can meet a woman like this without losing balance. To love her is to surrender the need for dominance. It is to step into a love that demands self-mastery. Her peace is not negotiable. It's her boundary. She doesn't argue to be understood because she has outgrown the language of persuasion. Her worth no longer depends on agreement. Like a mountain, she stands immovable, serene, complete. To the conscious masculine, this stillness feels like invitation, a sacred challenge to rise. To the unconscious, it feels like rejection. And that difference defines who stays and who leaves. The men who cannot match her peace label her cold, unreachable, too independent. But those who understand will see that her calm is not absence, but wholeness, the result of shadow work, heartbreak, and transcendence. There's an ancient power in her now, something primal and disciplined at once. She has integrated her chaos. She has befriended her storm, And in doing so, she has become the embodiment of Stoic femininity. Emotion without attachment, compassion without depletion, power without aggression. She no longer needs to prove that she's strong. Her quiet already says it. Men sense it. Some are drawn in awe, others in fear, because to be near her is to feel your own dissonance rise to the surface. She doesn't fix it for you. She doesn't carry it. She simply holds her vibration steady, and in that stillness, all falsehoods begin to shake. Her peace, over time, becomes something more than presence. It becomes revelation. Around her, truth cannot hide. Masks start to slip. Intentions surface. Energy speaks louder than words. She has refined her perception to the point where she doesn't listen to what people say. She feels what they mean. This sensitivity, once her burden, has become her compass. It guides her through life with quiet precision, cutting through manipulation like sunlight through fog. Men who encounter her often feel an unease they can't articulate. They sense that their usual charm doesn't land, that their practiced charisma finds no target. Her stillness absorbs nothing and reflects everything. Jung might describe this as the feminine no longer functioning as projection. She no longer serves as the screen for his unresolved anima. Instead, she stands as mirror, clear and unmoved. And when a man sees himself in that reflection, not the version he performs, but the one he denies, the confrontation begins. This is why peace feels so threatening. It's not what it does. It's what it reveals. A peaceful woman's energy exposes every place within a man where unrest still lives. Her composure becomes a contrast, and in that contrast, he must decide. Will he evolve, or will he retreat into the comfort of noise? Those who retreat will blame her. They'll call her distant, detached, emotionless. They'll say she doesn't care, because they can't feel her feeding their insecurity anymore. But the truth is, she cares differently now. Her compassion is mature measured, not boundless. She knows that empathy without discernment is self-destruction. She has learned that saving someone who resists healing is not love. It's avoidance of abandonment. So she no longer saves, she witnesses. Seneca once said that to be calm is the highest achievement of the self. She has reached that summit, but make no mistake, it wasn't reached through comfort, but through collapse. Her peace was born from war, the internal kind. The kind where a woman must face her attachment to pain, her addiction to validation, her compulsion to prove her worth through endurance. When she stopped fighting for acknowledgement, something inside her shifted. She stopped confusing peace with passivity and realized it was power all along. To a conscious man, this evolution is magnetic. He sees in her calm not indifference, but integrity. Her energy becomes invitation to match her frequency, not to penetrate it. She inspires without instructing. He feels it in the rhythm of her presence, that steady, grounded pulse that says, I am whole, and I do not need you to complete me. That kind of woman does not ignite desire. She awakens devotion. But to the man who still lives through projection, she is unbearable. He cannot locate himself in her silence, cannot manipulate her attention to feed his ego. Her peace removes his power to perform, and when performance ends, the truth of his own instability begins. She does not expose him with cruelty. She simply refuses to participate in delusion. Her restraint becomes revelation, and revelation is rarely comfortable. So what do men secretly fear about a peaceful woman? Not her distance, not her silence, not even her self-sufficiency. What they fear most is that her calm proves something devastating, that she doesn't need their chaos to feel alive. She has transcended the dynamic that once made them necessary. Her peace is the proof of her self-sufficiency, and for the ego that feeds on being the center of her storm, that is extinction. The longer he stays in her presence, the clearer the divide becomes. Her calm doesn't shrink in the face of tension. It expands. It absorbs his anger, his insecurity, his need for reaction, and gives him nothing to hold on to. The peaceful woman's silence is not passive. It's an act of mastery. Every moment she chooses not to react, she reclaims energy that used to be stolen by conflict. Every breath she takes in restraint becomes a declaration. I am no longer available for chaos. At first, this drives him mad. The ego, after all, thrives on friction. It needs proof of dominance, evidence of impact. But her composure denies him both. He begins to realize that control without chaos feels like insignificance. Without the battlefield, where can he prove his worth? Without her volatility, how can he define his strength? In her stillness, the false masculine begins to crumble, not because she attacks it, but because she simply refuses to sustain it. Jung once described this as the collapse of projection. When a man can no longer cast his unresolved shadow onto the feminine, he must turn inward. Her calm forces that introspection. Her peace is the mirror that no longer flatters. It reflects back not fantasy, but truth. The parts of himself he's avoided in noise, distraction, and conquest. The same peace that draws him in begins to terrify him, because it demands self-awareness in place of control. And yet, she does not punish or condemn. Her energy remains neutral, even compassionate. But it is a compassion with boundaries. Love informed by wisdom. She knows that to enable dysfunction is not kindness, it's participation in delay. Her empathy is no longer rescue. It's recognition. I see your pain, but I won't carry it. This detachment is what separates the awakened feminine from the naive. It is not that she stopped feeling. It's that she stopped confusing reaction with connection. To the man who's ready, this calm feels like initiation. He begins to soften in her presence, not from weakness, but from awakening. Her peace teaches him that strength is not dominance, it's discipline. That love is not possession, it's permission. That power is not found in control, but in composure. The more he observes her, the more he realizes that she governs her inner world the way empires wish they could govern nations, quietly, firmly, without chaos. But most men are not ready for that kind of lesson. They crave her peace, but resist the purification it demands. They want her light, but not the mirror it shines. They confuse her boundaries with barriers, her neutrality with rejection. And so they oscillate, pulled toward her calm. Repelled by their own unrest, they long to be chosen by her, not realizing that she doesn't choose from longing. She chooses from alignment, because the peaceful woman's love is not reactive. It's responsive. It's not a fire that burns out. It's a flame that endures only where there is oxygen, truth, presence, reciprocity. Anything less, and she lets it extinguish itself. There's no dramatic ending, no chaos, no revenge, just silence, the kind that says everything. And in that silence, men learn the hardest truth, that peace, once embodied, cannot be possessed. It can only be matched. Eventually, something inside him breaks, not from her cruelty, but from his own confrontation with peace. The quiet she embodies becomes unbearable because it holds no foothold for his chaos. In her presence, his defense mechanisms have nowhere to hide, no argument to win, no reaction to provoke, no validation to extract, only stillness, only truth. He begins to understand why her peace unsettles him. It exposes how restless he truly is. Jung once said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Her serenity is that mirror, merciless in clarity, holy in purpose. It forces him to see how much of his masculinity was built on resistance, how much of his power depended on someone else's emotional labor. Without her storm to calm, his ego trembles in silence, and she watches not with judgment, but with knowing. She's seen this pattern before, lived it, transcended it. Once, she too feared peace. Once, she mistook it for boredom, mistook chaos for connection. But now, she understands that peace is not the absence of love, it is its purification. Love that requires conflict to feel alive is not love, it's addiction. And she refuses to feed addiction disguised as affection. The peaceful woman has learned that equilibrium is her inheritance. It's not a mask she wears. It's a frequency she has earned through suffering consciously. Every disappointment became a teacher, every betrayal a mirror. Now, her spirit no longer flinches at loss. She knows that what leaves her only makes space for what aligns. And that knowledge, that quiet certainty, is what men fear most. Because you cannot manipulate a woman who isn't afraid to lose you. To the awakened masculine, however, her peace is a call, a sacred invitation to evolve beyond ego. He sees her calm, not as rejection, but as revelation. It calls him to examine his impulses, to meet her not in noise, but in presence. He learns that love is not something to be conquered, but something to be honored. In her silence, he finds not emptiness, but direction. She is the embodiment of balance, the merging of softness and steel, compassion and boundary. She no longer swings between extremes. She moves from center. Jung called this integration, the unification of opposites within the psyche. She carries both the nurturing feminine and the discerning masculine within her, which is why her energy feels complete. She does not chase. She does not collapse. She simply exists in alignment, and alignment is magnetic. The irony is that the very quality men once overlooked, her calm, becomes the thing they crave most once it's gone. They remember how her presence steadied them, how her silence made them introspect, how her absence echoes louder than any argument. But by then, she has already transcended the need to be understood. She doesn't close her heart. She closes the cycle. Her peace is her power, and in a world addicted to chaos, nothing is more terrifying than a woman who cannot be disturbed. ChatGPT.noi. Her presence begins to change the atmosphere around her. Rooms feel quieter, conversations slower, time more deliberate. People instinctively lower their voices when she speaks. There's something sacred about a woman who moves without haste, who no longer performs urgency to prove her importance. The peaceful woman doesn't rush to be heard because she knows truth doesn't compete with noise. It waits, patiently, for the noise to collapse under its own weight. This is what unnerves most men. They're used to controlling tempo, to dictating rhythm, reaction, emotion. But she doesn't dance to their pace anymore. Her energy doesn't rise and fall with external validation. It moves to the rhythm of discernment. When she listens wholly. When she speaks, she does so only once. And when she leaves, she never returns to chaos she's already mastered. That kind of stability doesn't just demand respect. It exposes every man still performing confidence instead of embodying it. Jung described this phenomenon as the meeting of shadow and self, where projection dissolves and authenticity begins. Her composure invites that meeting in everyone she encounters. She doesn't challenge men with confrontation. She challenges them with clarity. Her peace says, "I will not meet you in war." And that disarms those who rely on conflict to feel powerful. Because what can dominance do when submission no longer exists? To men still ruled by ego, her calm feels like invisibility. They can't read her, can't predict her next move. Their need for certainty becomes desperation, and desperation always exposes insecurity. They crave a reaction, any reaction proof that they still matter. But she gives none, not out of cruelty, but out of mastery. She's not withholding emotion to manipulate. She's protecting energy to preserve alignment. This is her paradoxical magnetism. The more she withholds chaos, the more others project meaning onto her silence. She becomes an archetype, not a woman of flesh and fear, but a symbol of everything they can't control. They call her cold, yet she is the warmest thing they've ever felt. They call her distant, yet she lives closer to truth than most ever will. Her distance isn't emotional absence. It's the boundary that keeps her soul intact. Seneca once wrote that a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trial. She has become that gem refined by friction, polished by solitude. The world mistook her stillness for fragility until it learned how indestructible softness can be. She has faced her storm, met her pain, sat in the silence of her own breaking, and from it, she built composure strong enough to cradle chaos without being consumed by it. To be near her is to feel your own noise, amplified every unhealed part of you, suddenly loud in the presence of her quiet. That's why her peace is so often mistaken for threat. It doesn't harm, it reveals. And not everyone is ready to see themselves reflected in still water, because a peaceful woman doesn't destroy men. She awakens them. What frightens the unhealed man most is not her words. It's the quiet conviction behind them. Her energy doesn't fluctuate to accommodate moods, and her peace cannot be provoked into proving itself. She no longer argues to be right, nor fights to be understood. Her calm isn't surrender, it's sovereignty. And this realization dismantles him in ways confrontation never could. Because power built on dominance collapses in the presence of someone who doesn't need to resist to be free. He starts to notice the subtle difference between stillness and silence. Silence used to mean distance, disinterest, rejection. But her stillness, that's something else. It's a force, not a void. It carries weight. Every unspoken word feels like a mirror, reflecting back his noise, his projections, his confusion. Jung called this the meeting with one's own shadow, the moment when the unconscious rises to the surface through another person. And her peace, unbothered and unmoved, is the perfect stage for that encounter. For the peaceful woman, this transformation wasn't learned from comfort, but from collapse. Once, she tried to calm others at the expense of herself. She mistook emotional control for emotional denial. But through pain, she discovered that true peace is not suppression. It's awareness without attachment. She no longer numbs what she feels. She simply refuses to let it rule her. That's why her energy feels different, grounded, not guarded, free, not defensive. Men sense this, even if they can't explain it. Her peace doesn't invite possession. It demands partnership. It doesn't beg to be admired. It expects to be met. And that's the paradox. They crave her, yet they can't consume her. They want her closeness, but her boundaries make them conscious. To love her, they must rise not in status, but in self-awareness. Her energy will not settle for anything less than alignment. This is what Jung and the Stoics both understood, that power and peace are twins, born from discipline. She has mastered what Seneca called tranquil strength, the rare ability to remain composed while the world loses its balance. Her serenity is not the absence of fire, but the control of its flame. It burns only where she chooses. And that control terrifies those who live in emotional chaos. They call her detached, when in truth, she's precise. They say she's cold, when in truth, she's focused. Because when a woman no longer operates from anxiety or ego, she becomes untouchable, not in arrogance, but in essence. She has reached a stage of evolution where her peace no longer asks permission to exist. It simply does. And that more than beauty, intelligence, or desire is what men secretly fear. The woman who no longer needs them to feel complete, yet still chooses connection from wholeness, because to face such a woman is to face oneself. And that's where the transformation truly begins, not in her, but in them. The peaceful woman doesn't force change, she invokes it. Her stillness becomes a quiet mirror through which the masculine confronts the fragility of his own strength. Her detachment reveals how much of his desire was born from control, how much of his affection was merely fear in disguise. She doesn't expose him with anger, but with calm awareness, and that calm is unbearable to those who equate love with turbulence. He begins to realize that her peace cannot be possessed because it is not conditional. It doesn't exist for him. It exists within her, and that distinction humbles him. It reminds him that connection without consciousness is dependency, that passion without a presence is chaos. The woman who has made peace her home becomes, for many men, the final teacher, the one who shows them. Through absence, that true intimacy cannot bloom where ego rules. She doesn't preach this truth. She embodies it. Her actions, deliberate and unhurried, speak of a mind that no longer seeks to dominate emotion, but to understand it. Her conversations are quiet, but disarming. Her presence commands attention without effort. It's not the kind of magnetism born of desire, it's born of discipline. She no longer chases validation, nor reacts to provocation. Her energy remains steady, and that steadiness exposes instability in everyone around her. To the conscious man, her peace is not a threat, it's a revelation. He sees in her the reflection of what he could become. A person free from compulsion, free from the need to win or prove. He feels drawn, not to possess her, but to match her frequency. That's the secret peace calls to peace. She becomes a silent invitation for evolution. But to those still trapped in their shadow, her serenity feels like annihilation. They try to stir her, test her, awaken an old fire that once burned for them. They miss the intensity, the drama, the chaos that used to make them feel alive. But she has learned anything that drains her cannot define her. She doesn't run from emotion. She simply refuses to entertain disorder. Her detachment is not coldness, it's consequence. When you've spent years carrying everyone else's emotions, peace becomes sacred. When you've poured yourself into chaos and watched it devour your tenderness, stillness becomes holy. Her peace is not performance, it's survival, refined into elegance. Jung once wrote that the woman within man and the man within woman are the bridges to the soul. She has crossed that bridge. She carries both energies in harmony. The receptive grace of the feminine and the grounded clarity of the masculine. That's why her love feels different now. It doesn't consume, it completes. It doesn't demand, it deepens. And for the first time, she realizes something profound. The men who once feared her peace were never really afraid of her. They were afraid of what her peace demanded: presence, truth, humility. Because to stand beside a woman like her, one must abandon performance and meet her in stillness. In the end, that is her quiet power. She doesn't destroy the masculine. She refines it. She doesn't command respect. She inspires it. Her life has become a kind of meditation, not one of withdrawal, but of alignment. She moves through the world like water, calm, adaptable, yet unstoppable. There is no resistance left in her, no compulsion to prove her goodness or explain her decisions. Her peace speaks for her, and though men may not always understand it, they feel it, that strange mix of softness and power that cannot be manipulated, cannot be owned. She no longer reacts to noise, she studies it. Every outburst, every accusation, every attempt to provoke her is received with quiet observation. Jung called this psychic distance the ability to witness emotion without fusing with it. It's not detachment from life. It's participation without enslavement. That's what she has mastered. Her emotions still move, but they no longer dictate. Her empathy still flows, but only toward those who can hold it with care. When a man steps into her orbit, he feels it instantly. The still gravity of someone who has reclaimed her power. There is no tension in her body, no hidden agenda in her gaze. She doesn't flirt to be seen or speak to be validated. Her presence alone demands a kind of honesty. The masks people wear begin to feel heavy around her. Her energy says, "You can't perform here." And that, more than anything, is what men secretly fear that around her. They cannot hide. She makes no threats, no ultimatums. Her peace is her boundary. You can either meet her in authenticity or be repelled by your own pretenses. There is no middle ground. She doesn't punish. She simply withdraws her energy from what lacks awareness. And her absence, once felt, becomes unforgettable. It leaves a void that no chaos can fill. Because she was never just company, she was clarity. He might not realize it right away, but her calm has altered him. Something in her silence planted a seed in his psyche, a question that won't leave him. Why do I need turbulence to feel alive? That's how her influence lingers. She awakens through reflection, not reaction. Her peace becomes the mirror through which the masculine begins to see himself clearly for the first time. And yet, she takes no credit for this awakening. The peaceful woman doesn't preach enlightenment, she embodies it. She understands that her stillness is not meant to change others, but to protect her alignment. Those who evolve in her presence do so by choice, not by her effort. She has learned that energy cannot be forced. It can only be met. Her relationships now move like her breath. Slow, deep, conscious. She no longer clings, no longer negotiates her worth in exchange for love. If a connection disrupts her peace, she knows it's not alignment, it's attachment. So she lets go, gently, without anger, without ceremony, because she understands that what leaves her is never loss. It's redirection. Men who once mistook her quiet for submission now recognize it as strength. They begin to see that peace isn't weakness. It's power that no longer seeks to prove itself. And that's what unsettles the ego most. It cannot win against what refuses to compete. Because her peace is not passive, it's active mastery. It takes immense courage to be this calm in a world that profits from chaos. It takes deep strength to choose stillness when others crave noise. And that's why she will always be feared, not because she's untouchable, but because she's free. Peace, when truly mastered, becomes its own language, one that doesn't need to convince or conquer. The peaceful woman speaks it fluently. Her silence doesn't beg to be understood. It commands understanding. She no longer raises her voice to assert her truth, because her presence already embodies it. Every breath she takes is a quiet declaration that she belongs entirely to herself. But men, especially those ruled by ego, struggle to comprehend this kind of power. They're used to women proving love through chaos, through tears, through effort, through endless reassurance. When she no longer does that, he misreads it as absence. What he doesn't realize is that her peace is not lack. It's fullness. She's not giving less. She's giving purely. There is no need to dramatize what is already secure within her. Jung once said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That is what her peace represents: complete self-acceptance. No pretense, no pursuit, just presence. And that's what men secretly fear most. The mirror of a woman who no longer needs to be chosen to know she is enough. When he meets her, the old strategies fail. Charm falls flat. Tension dissipates. Emotional manipulation meets air. She listens without absorbing, loves without losing, forgives without forgetting. Her energy no longer bends to win affection or prove patience. It simply is. The absence of emotional reaction doesn't mean she's detached. It means she's sovereign. In her stillness, he feels the truth of his own noise. The man who once found comfort in control begins to feel exposed. The man who equated intensity with intimacy realizes he doesn't know how to love without resistance. Her peace dismantles his identity because it reveals the boy within the one who fears quiet, who confuses calm with emptiness. She becomes the test he didn't know he was taking. But for those who rise to meet her peace, something profound happens. They discover that her calm doesn't cage, it liberates. It teaches by example that real love doesn't consume, it centers. Real connection doesn't drain, it deepens. In her world, stillness isn't stagnation, it's mastery in motion. She is not the fantasy of the chaotic lover, nor the caretaker of the broken. She is the mirror of maturity, and that mirror demands awareness. She doesn't ask anyone to heal for her. She simply refuses to entertain what hasn't. Her peace is not a prize, it's a vibration. You don't win it, you attune to it. And when she finally meets a man who carries his own calm, who doesn't need to dominate her softness or fix her silence, something shifts. Two balanced forces meet. There's no chase, no resistance, no drama, only resonance. That's the secret ending most never reach, not destruction, but harmony. Because peace isn't the absence of passion, it's the evolution of it. It's passion refined through self-awareness, grounded in purpose, freed from fear. The peaceful woman doesn't live to be understood. She lives to be aligned, and the man who understands that will never fear her calm. He will protect it. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. If this message spoke to you, Breathe it in. Let it settle. Let it remind you of your own power. The quiet kind that doesn't need to shout to be felt. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe peace is the new form of strength. And tell me in the comments, what does peace mean to you now?